Welcome to the All Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Steve Inman, joined as always by co-host Chris Brito. The Knicks are facing the injury bug, but have won 9 in a row. The NBA has announced their all-star rosters, and the trade deadline is less than a week away. We have so much to get to. But first, Chris, my friend, how are you?
What's up, Steve? I'm so happy to be here on the All Hoops podcast. Can we talk about how amazing our boy Jalen Brunson has been? He has continued to prove the whole world wrong, except Knicks fans, obviously. Um, I'm just, I think every other show or every other week, every other month, I'm always impressed by like how Jalen continues to rise his rank and his level. And now he's finally been named an all-star. We obviously just believe that he deserved to be a starter. I think he even outplayed Tyrese Halliburton in the time that he was able to play, just because Jalen was carried more of a load. The Knicks beat the Pacers in a crazy game last night, but it felt like a vintage Jalen Brunson performance. The team was down 15 points and somehow the Knicks were able to pull it off. And I think it's so indicative of the overall play of the Knicks as of late, but I think it also speaks to the character and just level that Jalen Brunson's at. He is an all-star.
I'm starting to get to the point, Chris, where I'm wondering if this is the best season we personally have ever seen from a Nick. I mean, I know we've had a Carmelo year where he finished third in MVP, right? I think he averaged around 27 a game that year. Brunson's at 27 a game now, 6.4 assists, about 4 rebounds a game. Defensively, he's undersized, but he's busting his butt out there. He's near the league lead in charges drawn, which I don't personally like, but at the same time, it's it's effective. It is effective, and it does make guys second guess running into him with his size. But Chris, he's well deserved. And then your guy now becoming my guy, Julius Randle, right? Three-time All-Star with the Knicks. This is impressive. 24 points a game, 5 assists, over 9 rebounds a game. He's not going to participate in that game. We're going to get to that in a bit. But the Knicks have two All-Stars.
Yeah, and it's the first time since Carmelo and Tyson Chandler were named all-stars. Um, and you referenced the Knicks that were able to get past the Celtics and lost to the Pacers. Um, the one thing I would say that's different about this team is that that team felt like that was probably the best it was going to be, right?
Yeah.
That like there was no real way to improve that team in the future.
They
Whereas,
were relying on a lot of 40-year-old guys like Herb
right,
Thomas, Jason Kidd, and Marcus Camby. And this team, while they've kind of jettisoned a lot of their young players, there still are some young players here. There are guys who can continue to get better. So yes, you are absolutely correct there.
yeah, and I think that's probably my favorite part. It's been like we're on this journey together with this team, and like we don't know what the final stop is, but we're just enjoying the ride, and I think that's the most important thing to keep in mind. Um, but back with the All-Star stuff, very happy for Julius. He deserves it. He is an incredible player. Um, I think after OG was traded, there was a lot of talk about also moving Julius Randle somewhere. And then we talked about it, and like there's really not another player that makes sense that fits either age-wise, level-wise, contract-wise. There was a lot of talk of it being Carl Anthony Towns. And I think if the Wolves weren't as good as they are now, I think there's maybe an argument for that.
Yeah.
Um, but the Wolves are doing really well. The Knicks are doing really well, and I don't think we need to trade Julius right now.
No, I mean, absolutely. The talk of the time was how do you upgrade that spot? You talked about Carl Anthony Towns. I'm not sure that was really an upgrade. We didn't really like that idea of moving Julius and picks for Towns, and then the Timberwolves got really good, and they weren't going to do that anyway. Julius is where he should be, and we'll see a core of Brunson, OG, Randall, and some high level role players. How far can that get you? I think the answer is we don't know. Um, I'm optimistic that this ride can continue indefinitely. And where does that leave you? It leaves you with a legit chance to have the best season we've ever seen from the Knicks. And so I would not really be eager to try to go make that big trade just yet. I don't think that trade is out there anyway. Um, but 9 in a row for the Knicks has been super impressive. We keep going back to them, but the All-Star game, right? I think they got both these lineups exactly right.
Yeah, me
Just
too.
going through the East real quick. You got Giannis as the captain, Joel Embiid averaging over 35 a game. He's there. Tyrese Halliburton, we mentioned. Lillard and Tatum are the starters. And then your reserves are Bam Adebayo, Paolo Banchero, Jaylen Brown, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Maxey, Donovan Mitchell, and Julius Randle. So, Chris, obviously, you and I both said we think they got this right. It probably is very unlikely that Randle or Embiid are going to play in these games. So, who do you think should replace those two guys in the East?
So I think there aren't really many great centers or front court players in the East to begin with.
You don't have to pick a front court player if
Oh,
you're somebody
oh,
else.
okay. So
Yeah,
I think if we're talking about two spots and they don't both have to be front court players, I would probably say Porzingis and Trey Young. Um, I think even though the Hawks are struggling, I think Trey Young has probably the best talent that the East has that probably deserves to be on that roster. Like, I am not part of that legion of fans who believes Derek White needs to be in the
no,
All-Star game
I
just
don't.
because Celtics have the best record in the East. I am
We're also trying to put a third Celtic on there. We're already trying to do that. We're trying to give
right,
them
but
Porzingis.
I think this team is doing so well in part because of Porzingis as well. Like, I think like Derek White was on this team last year too. Um, I just think
It reminds me about 10 years ago, the Hawks. They had about a 60 win season. They looked amazing and they got flamed out, I think, in the first or second round or second round. They were, Joe
yeah,
Johnson, Al Horford, Josh Smith, Jeff Teague, and Kyle Korver, right? That team got four All-Stars on the roster, with Kyle Korver being the fourth guy. And at the time, the sentiment was, well, you gotta vote him in. They're the best team. He's so important to what they do. He averaged like 13 a game. And they talked about the intangibles and all these things. Obviously, Derek White, and he got in. And it didn't really make any sense then. And now, if you look back on that All-Star roster, you're going to be like, wait, how in the world did that happen? But the narrative of this is the best team, they deserve as many All Stars as possible was so powerful back then. And it's a similar situation with Derek White now, where it's like he's a super important player that you don't always see the impact of him in the box score. But at the same time, this is the All Star game. It's only 12 guys on the roster now. We're talking about maybe 13 or 14 with these injured guys. That is the top of the top guys. And for me, yes, the intangibles are important, but you got to be able to put up numbers. And, he's averaging 15 a game. He's an important player, as I said. If you told me he's a guy who is, an X factor in the finals, that's not crazy to me. And that might be more important for the Celtics anyway. But All Star, you can't do that.
yeah, and I think listen, that's also a great argument to not include Porzingis. I get it because Porzingis has also been injured a lot. So
Yeah. I
so
mean, for me, the guys I would pick, you mentioned Trey, obviously their record isn't great, but so what? Like he's still putting up monster numbers. I would put Trey Young in the All-Star game. I think that would be the first one. The second one for me would be Jared Allen. Jared Allen and what he's been able to do in Cleveland, it's awesome how great he's playing. He's played in 41 games. You kind of think he's missed some time. He hasn't really missed that much time.
yeah.
He's averaging over 15 a game, 10 rebounds. He is their defensive anchor with no Mobley. With Garland out, he's up to scoring. And you know,
And Cavs are fourth in the East
obviously,
too.
they're doing really well. And yes, we just said Derek White, you're averaging 15 a game. You can't do that. Now we're trying to put Jared Allen in 15 points a game, right? But at the same time, Jared Allen is like the anchor of this Cavs defense. And I said pick any players. I said you don't have to pick front court players, but at the same time, if we're replacing two front court players, we should probably at least get one front court player back. And to me, the most deserving front court player in the East that didn't get in is Jared Allen. He didn't even get mentioned. You heard some Miles Turner buzz, you heard Porzingis, but like Jared Allen's been awesome. And this is a guy who's made an all-star team before. I don't know why he's getting no buzz at all, but he's been great.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think there's a I mean, you just convinced me that Allen should probably be in there instead of Porzingis. So I would probably pick Porzingis or pick Allen over him. Mostly because the Cavs have been playing without two of their better players.
I
This
mean, Porzingis has been great. He's averaging almost 20 a game,
He has been
seven
great.
rebounds, 52% from the floor. Um, he hasn't played a ton. He's only played 35 games this year compared to Allen's 41. Is that 6 games enough to make a difference? I would probably, they might wind up with three spots, right? Right now we already have two injured guys. How do we know there's not gonna be a third injured guy in the next week? Guys are battling injuries. This stuff happens. So like, if you told me Porzingis, Allen, and Trey all get in, I think they're all deserving guys.
I agree. I agree. And so you want to talk about the West?
Yeah. So we got the starters. We had started with Captain LeBron averaging 25, 8 and 8, basically. He's been unbelievable when playing. You have Luka Doncic coming off his 73 point game. Unreal there. He's averaging now almost 35 a game, 9.6 assists, 8.6 rebounds. It's
Monster.
historically amazing. You have Kevin Durant doing his big numbers, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander only a quiet 31 a game.
Hmm.
Nikola Jokic doing his numbers, and then the reserves: Devin Booker, Stephen Curry, Anthony Davis, Anthony Edwards, Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Karl Anthony Towns. So, Chris, we talked about this last night. You and I kind of were in the agreement that they got this right. But at the same time, it seems very clear to me that the Western Conference had a lot more snubs than the Eastern Conference. It was kind of a struggle to pick which guys deserve to make replacements in the East, whereas the West, you know, the Kings had two very worthy guys and De'Aaron Fox and Sabonis who are putting up monster career high numbers, and neither one of them got on the team. They should both be on there if there's any replacements.
Yeah, I think it's tough to argue against. And also the arg I mean, listen, I think like a guy like Curry whose team is 12th in the West, like I mean, if you want to say an argument about against Trey Young for him not to be in the East, like it's the same one that applies for Steph Curry, you know?
Right.
That being said, I think the West roster looks so stacked compared to
It's so good.
like especially with no Embiid, who's gonna guard Jokic? I mean, no one guard plays defense, but
No one's guarding anyone anyway, but at the same time, this is why I believe this should be a 15-man roster. You have a 15-man roster in the NBA. Why wouldn't the All-Star game be the same thing?
what's
Um,
the argument?
unlike, say it again.
What's the argument for 15?
My argument for 15 is basically every year we have a ton of snubs. There's an MVP candidate every season that just doesn't make the All-Star team. A lot of the last couple of years has been a guy like Damian Lillard in Portland. And there's no financial incentive to keep guys off the team like there is for all NBA, right? It's like it's an honor, right? When we look back on this season 3 years from now, I'm gonna be like, wait, Domantas Sabonis should have been an all-star. You're not really thinking that way. You're gonna be thinking, okay, he had a decent year. He probably picked it up at the end after the all-star break because he didn't make the team. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't Fox's fault. Um, Even if you want, I just think there's no incentive not to do it. Plus, half the time when these guys go to the all-star game, the first thing you hear from their coaches is, don't play my guy too many minutes. Like, there's plenty of minutes to go around for all these guys to play. Um, I also think, a guy like a Scotty Barnes, right? Scotty Barnes is a good young player who's getting better, but like that's not a guy you would consider for an all-star game. That is a guy who can get some national recognition if there was, 15 spots, right? He's averaging over 20 a game, 8 points, over 8 rebounds. That's a guy, six assists. Like they're almost similar numbers to Randall, but like you're not going to talk about him because you're not talking about the Raptors. Whereas I think we would get more exposure to a lot of these young players if all of a sudden we said, hey, Scotty Barnes just made the All-Star team as the last guy on the roster. And I think there's plenty of guys who are deserving.
You know what? I kind of like the addition of Scotty Barnes too. Like it's a good one. Good by
Just thought of that
you.
right now. Just thought about that right now. I was like, wait, is he having a good year? And I was like, oh, he is.
Yes, yeah. Um, the other thing that's kind of funny about this whole All-Star process because of so the Celtics are the best team at this point of the season, just like last year. So Joe Mazzulla was the coach last year. He can't coach it this year. So right now, there's a funny predicament because the Bucks, who right now are the second, who have the number two seed in the East, are a half game above the Knicks. Doc Rivers just took over last week, and if the Bucks stay in second, Doc is going to be the one to coach the East. I find that so crazy. I mean, you can't, I don't
If
even,
I'm Doc Rivers, though, I'm going to be like, I have to, overhaul this entire defense. I have to get these guys right. Why am I going to be focused on this All-Star game when I'm 0-2 as a head coach, basically, at the Bucks? Like, I'm not. I'll
yeah.
defer to Thibodeau, who's third right now. He'll love to do it, obviously, and people will think I'm the
Ooh,
right guy for doing it.
defense, defense.
Ice box. I mean, the idea of Thibodeau trying to get these guys superstars try to
Well,
play defense in the
it's
All-Star
funny.
game. I think, those mic'd up segments, that's it's worth it alone just to give him that spot.
Well, it's funny because Tibbs also deserving of doing it too. He won Coach of the Month last
Really is.
January. Um, anyway, just to finish off with
Yeah.
the All-Star point. I think as much as I love the East, I think the West is going to destroy them, but I'm hoping for a good
You
game.
never know. I mean, these things, they're all elite players. It's hard to tell who's like, you know, if all of a sudden, let's say Giannis hypothetically decides, I'm going to guard my man, like that can be literally make the difference in the whole thing. So I can't predict it. The people who bet on the All-Star game in terms of like who's going to win, that's where I draw the line. Even the
Hey,
over under, sure, but like who's going to win the game? Like we don't know how seriously these guys are going to take it. Sometimes they try in the fourth quarter, sometimes they don't. They tried the Elam rule to make that an incentive, and it seemed like it was a better game at the end, but then sometimes it's not. It's a whole thing.
I told
I will take the fall for this one. Forgot Pascal Siakam. Pascal Siakam should also absolutely be one of the top front runners for one of those East spots. You kind of forget about him because he was traded, right? But he's still in the East. His
yeah.
numbers are great. 22 a game, over 6 rebounds, about 5 assists, 52% from the floor, and he's played, about 15 games more than Porzingis. Almost. He's at 47 games. So what we said, Porzingis was at 35. We said so 12 games more than Porzingis. So if you're going with bigs, Pascal Siakam, Jared Allen are definitely guys. If not, you can go with Trey Young, and then I would probably put Porzingis fourth on that list, and then our guy Scotty Barnes should be considered as well. So plenty of options actually now that we flushed that one out.
Um, let's move over to something a little less happy and a little bit more that's hanging over as a dark cloud over Knicks fans, which is
Yeah.
Julius Randle. You alluded to it earlier at the top of the show with our boy. So he has this shoulder injury. He got it when we were playing against the Heat, when the Knicks were playing against the Heat. It's one of those tough injuries to predict because it really solely depends on how fast he's healing and how how injured he is. Like we didn't really receive an update till like was it yesterday, I think. And even that update said that he was going to get reevaluated 2 to 3 weeks
Basically post All-Star.
post All Star. So the conspiratorial part of what we were thinking, because we both agreed on this, um, is that we sort of thought that the Knicks were punting a decision on Randall because they didn't want that to drive up or drive down the value of a potential piece coming to the team. So might be smart on their end. I'm not going to lie because that is one of those
He's not
injuries.
gonna fall for that.
Probably not, but the one thing that like I kind of give them credit for is that you can't really say anything about that injury until you make a decision, and it looks like the Knicks are punting a decision on it 2 to 3 weeks from now, which seems to be a common practice with this. It looks like when Steph Curry got injured with this similar injury, the Warriors took about a week or so to decide on whether he needed surgery on it, and he ended up not needing it.
Right. I mean, that's the hope. If he gets a surgery, obviously his season is done. And so this has been such a special season for the Knicks. And without Randall or a guy who can replace some of Randall's production, you're not going to win the championship this year. You're not going to have that magical run. It's just I understand they won 9 in a row. They've won a couple of big games without Randall and OG Anunoby, who's dealing with an elbow issue. But you're not going to win this thing without being at full strength. And so the hope is that Randall can get this going, get healthy. Um, we've done this a million times. I don't really get why he needs to be in the game in garbage time. You could debate whether this was garbage time. They're up 115 to 98, 427 to go. They're up 17 with 4.5 minutes left. Um, Brunson was in the even after the Randall injury, which looked bad at the time and looks bad now. Brunson was in the game with 90 seconds to go. Like, what are we doing? The lead got bigger from that point on. I just, I'm just beside myself on that. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, if you can't protect a 20 to 20 plus point lead with 3 minutes to go in your bench, what are we doing here? And so Brunson is now the sole offense, more or less. And so far, it's working because he's an incredible MVP candidate. But at the same time, they, in my opinion, are going to need to limit his workload when they can. They need to pick their spots to be like, okay, we're up big with 4 minutes to go. There's no reason for Brunson to be taking these charges and taking these hits. And I'm hoping that the Randall injury will allow Thibodeau and his staff to learn from this and not say this is just how we play.
Fine. I know you were directing a lot of that toward me, so I will now respond.
Let's hear it.
Uh, I don't really have a good comeback. All this to say that
Good start.
I think with teams like the Heat and teams that are a threat, I think you don't leave any room for possibility for them to come back. So I get your point about us being up. I just think that you want to make sure the coffin is sealed as tight as you can. And listen, I know you're gonna roll your eyes and you're gonna shake your head. I totally get that, but
Okay.
that is why you do it. I mean, you don't want to be in a situation where this team steals a win.
Okay, let's just say this team steals a regular season win. They probably learn from it. They can go through the film and be like, here's what we did wrong. To me, that is way better than now we're wondering if their season is
See,
over without
see,
Julius Randle.
see,
And
this
that
is
would not have happened if they yanked everybody with 4.5 minutes to go.
so
Now, granted, again, the garbage time thing. Is it garbage time? 4.5 minutes to go up 17. You could debate that. But the
right.
point was after that, they kept all the starters in the rest of the game anyway. It got out of reach. Like if you're up 20 with 2 minutes to go, take everybody out. What are we talking about?
So okay, listen to me. So this is so I listen, I can't speak to why he left Brunson in with 2 minutes left or whatever you said, 3 minutes left. I can also I'm
90 seconds. 90 seconds.
Okay, 90 seconds.
Yeah.
The whole okay. So the thinking is like you just don't let them come back from that. And like I think if this was like like a inferior team like the Hornets or like another, you know, a bottom dweller, like okay, then I completely and 100% agree with that premise. That is all. So I am half agreeing with you this time, unless you want to
But like
counter.
this is not a one-time thing. This is a all the time thing.
Hey,
And when he's asked about
hey,
it, he's just like, this is
when
how we play.
when the Knicks were almost up 40 against the Nuggets, he didn't play Brunson that whole fourth quarter. So
You keep saying that. I think he did. And I
he
like
didn't,
he still played like 30 something minutes, didn't he?
he didn't play him.
Okay. Well, they really like Brunson is incredible and he's been so special for this team. And he's undersized. And sometimes he looks like he's just gassed at the end of some of these games. And like
I do worry about some of those hits and like how that is gonna like add up
if
toward the
if
end.
if you can just steal 4 or 5 minutes at the end of 5 more games by the end of the year, I think that stuff can make a small difference. And again, this has been a fun season. It could turn into a special season. And the way you're going to do that is by keeping your key guys healthy. And look, we don't know. It's very possible that he can run these guys into the ground and they'll just keep doing what they're doing forever, right? Like we saw with Derrick Rose, Luol Deng, and Jimmy Butler in Chicago, right? Luol Deng, he had all those minutes. He was never the same when he got his big contract and went to the Lakers. Jimmy Butler, he's been a workhorse.
Killing
So
it.
there's no direct correlation to the heavy minutes. But common sense tells you that there's a greater chance for injury on the court. And so if you don't need your stars on the court, you should consider not having them on the court for blowouts. That's all I'm saying.
So
We'll see
so
if they respond to
but
that.
so one last question to this
Yeah.
in theory or grand statement. Um, at what point would you have pulled them then? 5 minutes? 6 minutes?
So like in
And
that game, I probably would have pulled around that time. Um, So like the Randall thing on my watch might have still happened. My issue with the whole thing is that the starting players, OG and Brunson, who are playing big minutes, right? They're still in the game for many minutes after that.
okay,
So like,
so that's what you have an issue with more so than the
that's
rest.
my issue. The Randall thing. It was a freak play. Those things happen. It was still you're playing a rival up 17, 4.5 to go. That's around the time I start considering a switch. I can't get on them for that, but I can get that on them for continuing to play the rest of the team
All right.
as if like this is game 7 of the finals. That's all. It's January.
All
Now it's
right.
February. It was January. But yeah, we can go back and forth on this. Thibodeau overall this season has done a very good job, just to be clear.
There you
Uh,
go.
Now, in terms of if Randall is not back, what can this team do? I like the idea of going out and getting Bogdanovich out of Detroit. This is a guy who can stretch the floor. He's got some size. He can score. Um, I'm a little concerned with you're losing Randall's playmaking. Um, and sometimes, granted, Randall has tunnel vision and it can be a little frustrating, right? But he's been pretty good. And Bogdanovich doesn't really ever pass, which is notable, right? But at the same time, this is a guy who can score. He's got some size, and I think he would probably cost one of our 2 first round picks this year. So I would consider something like that. If he looks like a good fit that Thibodeau is going to be interested in playing, you have him under contract again next year for 19 million. If you don't love the fit, you can kind of just trade him at over the summer to a different contender, and you could probably get close to your value back. So that's kind of what I'm thinking there with Bojan Bogdanovic.
Uh, I don't necessarily disagree with it. I think that's solid. I think a scoring punch is always a good idea.
41% from three this year.
I kind of lean more toward adding someone in the backcourt, someone like a Malcolm Brogdon type. This is why. If Brunson gets injured or is off for a few games,
He said over.
what did I say?
You said if he gets injured, I'm saying season's over then. Like he's your MVP.
Well,
But
you sort
I know
well
what you
this is
mean.
well this is why you sort of need like another ball handler. It was evident to me, like look at the difference between Randall being out and Brunson being out. Randall had virtually everybody, and we still lost against the Magic, and we still lost against well actually no, it wasn't that game. Um, okay, right? Yesterday we were missing virtually three. We were missing three of our starters, and the team really never lost a beat. So my thing is, you sort of make the whatever you make an observation that like this team just needs another ball handler because Deuce is not it. I love Deuce, but Deuce is not it. Um, this is really a protection for if Brunson's out for a few games. And I
No,
think
I love it. I think that's a great idea. He's another guy who, like Bogdanovich, 41% from three this year. Um, my not concern with it, but um, if Randall is out for the year, I'm very concerned about OG kind of playing against fours all year. Him and Josh Harder are basically going to be your power forwards now, and
well,
so
I mean,
playing is pretty small.
you can I'm not too worried about OG doing that though. I think he doesn't seem like someone who's complaining about anything. I am a little concerned about his elbow injury because it seems like it was only going to be a one game thing, and now it's like 3 games later. But we'll
Yeah,
keep an eye out on that. And on the bright side, the Knicks have won nine, and
nine in a row.
they're going to play against the
Lakers.
Lakers on Saturday night. We're recording this on a Friday. I think we have a good chance against that, and I think uh, over the next 5 games, they face the Magic, the Rockets. Uh, I'm forgetting the other two, but I think I feel good about the Knicks heading into the All-Star break.
Yeah, no, I do as well. It's been a very fun time, and in a perfect world, they can finish this stretch strong. And then you get back post All-Star break, and they say, "Good news, Julius Randle is ramping up, and he'll be ready to go in the next couple of weeks." So, you know, I was a little doom and gloom about it, right? But at the same time, they need him. They do need him. They don't have a offensive scoring punch to say, okay, Obi Toppin, it's your time, right? Like they traded him, and they don't really look wrong for doing it, right? This is not a Obi Toppin should have been saved here, but at the same time, they do need that scoring punch now. Whether it's a Brogdon, whether it's a Clarkson, whether it's a Bogdanovich, they do need more help. So I think what they need to evaluate between now and Thursday is what are our chances of getting Julius Randle back at close to full strength. If you believe he can come back, and he believes he can come back, then I think the guard scoring punch becomes the priority. If you're not super confident in that, a wing, a bigger guy like Bogdanovich, I think that becomes the priority. So it's up to them and their medical team to evaluate what are the chances that Julius Randle can beat this
So,
and avoid surgery.
so here's my thing though. Is Brogdon a Tibbs guy? Like I don't like historically, I don't think of any player that has come in that has been solely an offense guy.
No, I think that's fair. And, we saw that with Cam Reddish, right? Like the front office traded a first round pick to get Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish doesn't in the rotation. And to me, that was a huge oversight by both sides to say we were not on the same page with this. We either need to force our coach to play this guy, or we need to make sure our coach is aware of this and can either give us the green light to make this trade. And so the hope is that Brogdon or Clarkson, whoever that guy is, they're all on the same page that this guy is going to play around X amount of minutes a game. And, you know, the difference between a flyer like Reddish and a, 20 plus $1 million a year guy in, Brogdon is if, he's not a Tibbs guy, he will become a Tibbs guy because there's no way the front office is going to allow their coach to not play a 20 plus $1 million a year guy that they just traded assets for now. Like they're going to have to try him out. And so,
What are the chances we get Derrick Rose back?
I mean, he's in Memphis. They're not going anywhere. But I think he's over the hill. He looked over the hill last year, and you
Yeah,
know, I also think they brought in Derrick Rose. It's not impossible, but they brought in Derrick Rose to try to be a mentor to Ja, and I still believe that is possible.
got it. Okay.
But it's probably going to be a next year thing. He's under contract for about 3.5 million next year. So I would believe unless you're actually offering a real asset, Derrick Rose is going to stay in Memphis.
One last thing before we move on to final thoughts. I just want to
Yeah.
say how great has Precious Achiuwa been on the Knicks.
Yeah. No, he's been important.
Like you and me, we texted each other. We said, "Oh, I don't think this was really he. It was just an add-on." But now, you can see how I can see why the Knicks wanted him. It's because he sort of acts a little bit as like an OG backup in the sense that like he can guard virtually anybody from 2 to 3, or maybe 3, 4, some 5. Um,
Not two,
not
but
2, but
not two.
he can't really guard big guys either. But he's just so switchable. He has no offense, but he is a Tibbs guy.
Right. And so let's just say hypothetically, he's your four if Randall's out. He's your starting power forward. You're gonna need that scoring punch somewhere else. And so that Brogdon idea of yours, I think that's a pretty good idea. The rebounding has been pretty good. In his last game against Indiana, he had 16 rebounds. He's also got a couple of double digit ones right before that. So, this is a guy who is important. And in this Indiana game, he played 43 minutes. And so it's pretty clear that Tibbs is going to play his starters. And no matter how much I scream, that's not going to change. All right, Chris, final thoughts time here. Um, More injury news, Joel Embiid with the meniscus. It doesn't look like he's going to play for a while. We'll see if he can avoid his surgery. Can this Sixer season be saved? They first game without him, Tyrese Maxey put up 51 points in a win over Utah.
No,
So they're done.
yeah, that's
Fair
it.
enough.
I mean, I
I
mean,
agree with
like, like, listen, like, I think what the Sixers should be doing is probably unloading and getting players that they can work for next year because otherwise, I think the season's like it's just what it is. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
I agree. You've heard a lot of talk in the last couple of days about this 65 game minimum for all NBA, for MVP. I think it's fine. I mean, if you want to change it to 60 games, okay. But I like the minimum. Everybody, agreed to it. Both sides agreed to it. And at the same time, this is something that will allow guys to stay on the court. And until a player like Embiid, an MVP candidate, comes out and says, the reason I got hurt is because I was pushing myself too much because I had to get in 65 games, to me, this should stay.
Well, I feel like some people online, including LeBron James, felt like people were saying that Embiid was like not faking, but sort of like maybe
Ducking out on Denver.
ducking out, and like LeBron was sort of calling out the people who were saying that about Embiid. But I think really the only people at fault here are the 76ers, right? Like, if he can't play, then why did you pretend that he could play on Saturday night? Like, they made that call 15 minutes before tip off or whatever it was.
I mean, this is a player who has gotten injured a lot. And, he's putting up incredible numbers. Is he's had an insane year, over 35 a game. Is part of the reason why he's been able to do that is because he's not playing that much. He's only played 34 games this year. We just said, we're not sure if Porzingis should be an all-star because he only played in 35 games. He played one more game than Embiid, right? Embiid has never played in 70 games in the season. Never. Like he's out of the 2014 draft. And
Yeah.
so this is a spectacular player who is never quite healthy, for long stretches. Last year was probably his most, the last couple of years have been his most healthy, 68 games, and then the MVP year, 66 games. So again, you want to make it 60 game minimum instead of 65, sure. But to me, you should not be getting a top award if you can't play in three-quarters of your team's games. It to me, it's that simple. There's too many
Like,
incredible players. And I would say, you know, 90, Joker playing in 95% of his team's games are more valuable than Embiid playing in 60% of his.
yeah, and I think and here's the other thing that kind of like annoys me about that conversation. Like for everyone else, right? If you were gone, if you called out sick, I mean, I know it's not the same thing, but like on some level, like showing up if you are healthy, for as many games as possible is part of being recognized for the privilege of this award. It's not saying that he doesn't deserve the job because he's one of the best players on the planet in this regard. I'm just saying that like this award thing is a privilege and like if okay,
Like when
like
Kyrie
so like
had this situation with the home road games, right? Where he couldn't play at home, he could only play on the road, and he was playing once or twice a week. He was averaging like 35 a game. He looked incredible. But it was also because he had so much rest that he can just give full 120% effort because he had so many recovery days. And Embiid is on track to play, was before the injury, was on track to play a little more than you know, half his team, more than, 60% of his team's games. And so it's a lot easier to dominate when you have way more time off than everybody else.
right. And like if I'm making it like right now, Jokic is probably gonna win the MVP award because in part because he plays almost every game and he's the best individual player this league has.
Yes.
And he shows up. I mean, he just plays every game. I know it's like I think that matters.
No, it definitely matters. I mean, this is last year he played in 69 games. Okay. That would be the most, that's more than any Embiid season he's ever had. Okay. And it's the fewest number of games that Joker's ever played in. Think about that. That
That's
was that was Joker's least amount of games, and it would have been Embiid's most amount of games. And granted, now of course we're talking about how available Joker is. He actually missed their last game with a back injury. He's questionable Friday night against Portland, but he's played in 47 games, and that's a big jump up from Embiid's 34. And we just want to see the best guys on the court, and obviously we hope Embiid can get there as quickly as possible. Not thinking it's going to be soon. It doesn't seem like. And so, now it seems like the Knicks are in the driver's seat for that 3 seed
or
or
second
higher.
or
Or
higher.
yeah, or higher. So yeah. Anything else, Chris, before we wrap up the show?
No, I'm looking forward to the trade deadline and seeing if the Knicks do anything. I don't think they necessarily are a gun to their head have to do anything. I think they're on the right track. I just hope our guys get healthy soon.
Yeah, no, I think there's gonna be plenty of interesting guys available. One thing I'm curious about is the guys who don't get traded, do they hit the buyout market? Guys like Kyle Lowry, Gordon Hayward, and Charlotte. Gordon Hayward would be a very nice addition for the Knicks if you can get him on a buyout. So there'll be plenty more interesting things to talk about even after the trade deadline, but we'll be back next week to talk about those big trades, and hopefully we'll get plenty of them. And thank you for listening on Apple and Spotify and watching on YouTube. And we'll be back next week to talk more NBA action.
Bye, everyone.